I retired last year from the Federal Aviation Administration, but I'm very pleased to be keeping my foot in the door of aviation, if you will, by working with the Executive Steering Committee for this conference. It has been a real pleasure putting this together, and I thank Sandy and all the folks involved with that for the opportunity. I'm really excited today to moderate this panel. We've got two of the trailblazers in the global transformation of air transportation with us this morning. Marc Hamy is the head of Air Traffic Management and Public Affairs Vice President at Airbus. He joined the company in 2010 as the Chief Operating Officer of Airbus ProSky. It's a new subsidiary of Airbus dedicated to ATM services. In 2013, he moved to Airbus SAS and assumed responsibility for all ATM activities at the corporate level. He's a founding member of the SESAR joint undertaking. He has an extensive background in air traffic control, having managed two of the main air traffic control centers in Europe, as well as serving as the CEO of the French air navigation services provider, the DSNA. Ed Bolton is the FAA Assistant Administrator for NextGen. He joined the FAA in September 2013 after a career with the U.S. Air Force, most recently with the rank of Major General, and the position of Deputy Assistant Secretary for Budget in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Financial Management and Comptroller. As Assistant Administrator for NextGen, he's leading the modernization of the U.S. National Airspace System. He heads a federal workforce of over 900 employees and manages the $100 billion NextGen budget. He previously served as commander of the 45th Space Wing and director of the Eastern Range at Patrick Air Force Base in Florida, and commanded the 30th Space Group at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. He also served as the Deputy Director for Systems Integration and Engineering at the National Reconnaissance Office. So for the next hour and a half, these gentlemen will bring you up to date on the status of the projects underway in the U.S. and Europe. They are integrating state-of-the-art technologies to create new navigation infrastructure that's going to deliver innovative concepts in air traffic management and new capabilities to airspace users. This topic is very consistent with what the AIAA is doing with this conference last year and this year, and that is having a focus all week on integration activities ongoing and discussions at a high level, but at a level lower than the plenary discussions to try to bring people up to date on what the research that goes on with members of the AIAA delivers ultimately to the community. So we're hoping to have a really good discussion about that. I'm going to ask each of them to speak and answer questions in the context of what's going on today and what we're planning for the future. I expect to hear about challenges and successes, about setbacks and opportunities. I want to touch on SESAR and NextGen's impact on air traffic management, airspace users, and other aviation stakeholders, as well as national and global interest. We'll be reserving time at the end for you all to come up and ask your questions, so please be making note of what you want to ask. So I'm going to start out by asking General Bolton to give us an update on NextGen, and that'll be followed directly by Mr. Hamy, who is going to provide the same for SESAR, and I believe he has some video for you with his presentation. Okay. So, General Bolton.
And how long would you like the update to be up front?
I think that, 5 to 10 minutes is good.
5 to 10 minutes is good. Let's see, it's still morning. Good morning, how y'all doing? All right, so I tried to wander into the crowd here. You don't have to look up there, I don't have any PowerPoint. I'm retired Air Force, but we're going to give it a shot of just talking to people. We'll see how that works out. So I wandered through and asked a few of you, first, thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time. It's important to me because, again, this is the next phase of our life's work. We're trying to do something important that we think is going to make this world better and safer and help our economy as well. So thank you for being part of it. I asked about 6 or 8 or 10 of you, hey, I know you. Thanks for being here and give me your questions now so I can integrate them into the presentation. And so after listening to all your questions, I've concluded that you're in the wrong presentation. So I have two choices: give the briefing that I have or the briefing that I wish I had. No, seriously, as I understand it, of course you want an update on NextGen, and you can hit me with specific questions because we have more time for Q&A than I thought. But you're interested in any specific challenges that we have, how the program is actually coming together, what we're doing as leaders to make things happen, how we're integrating with Europe, and then how we're preparing for the future. Is that approximately, does that summarize kind of I see some nods, the ones that aren't nodding, I'm ignoring, so I'm going to go with that. So first of all, the NextGen program. So first, who here is very familiar with NextGen? Raise your hand. All right? Who here is somewhat familiar with NextGen? Who has no familiarity with NextGen? Okay, I'm in that middle group. I've been in this, I've been in this job 8 months if you include the 3 weeks I was furloughed. And so it's, day 6, right? You can't make this up. You can't make this up. So early on in the program, and of course we want to thank Vicki Cox, of course. She's kind of the mother of NextGen. I replaced her. And of course, which makes me, I'm kind of like that scruffy kid that came to take NextGen to the prom and then eloped with her. So, so that's kind of our roles,
I like it.
You like that? So she has a shotgun wedding kind of thing going on. So here we are in the program. The bottom line is that I won't spend the time defining NextGen. I'm going to assume there's some fundamental knowledge in NextGen. I'm going to say what we're focused on and what we're doing. So we have really 4 major priorities, 4 areas that we're working. The number one is the execute programs. That's to address the things that people say you've spent all this money and you've not made any progress. Next is to deliver capabilities. Now, it turns out, and again, most of my experience, she talked about my command experience. Most of my experience is as an engineer, program manager, systems engineer. It turns out, engineering students remember this, that the customers don't care about engineering milestones, right? Who knew this? They care about capability, right? They care only about capability. So that's the next major area, is that how do we deliver capability in the next 1 to 3 years by working with industry, right? Third is collaboration. That's where our friends from Europe come in. But of course, that's why I snuck that question on Mike. The first level of collaboration comes within the FAA, working across, if you know anything about the FAA, you know it's a uniquely stovepipe organization, right? I mean, we're being honest here. And so a lot of our energy is spent in working across those themes. And then the final is to sharpen the saw. Whatever aficionado of leadership you are, whether you look at Jim Collins, Colin Powell, Steve Covey, there is some part of your approach has to be examining what you've done and then taking that feedback and trying to make yourself better. I'm going to focus mostly on the deliver capabilities part because I don't have as much time as I thought I might have, but you can ask me questions on it. So first of all, executing programs. If we spent $4.6 billion since 2009 in NextGen, and a lot of folks are saying, well, why don't we have more? It's because the first level of funding went to building the infrastructure. If you replace your wiring, your plumbing, right, your house isn't warmer or the water isn't better because you replace your plumbing. You're just glad you did it because you have to do that. So that's what we've done. That's the iPad analogy. To put a focus on it, we've taken the top 7 programs, ADSB, Datacom, ERAM, TAMR, TFDM, Voice and Swim, and that essentially really is communications, navigation, surveillance, and integration upgrades. There's a long briefing for each of those. We have 19 major milestones in over 2 years. 12 in 14, 7 and 15. We're 5 for 5 so far. We have 2 more in June, 1 in July. We have 5 in October. If I'm still smiling, 1 November, then we will be able to claim that we've turned around the belief that we can't execute program milestones. We'll have facts. Now, are we going to make them all? We're not going to make them all. 16, 17, that's pretty good. Your baseball player gets you in the Hall of Fame, right? Right? If you're in the NBA, you're a champion every year, right? So we're going to miss 1 or 2, but we'll be on top of it. We'll know why, and we'll have a reason, right? And so that's executing milestones. About collaboration, the actual program management part of the work is mostly executed by our corporate partners in the ATO. And we have a great affection for, a great working relationship with, and we sit down with them on a regular basis, and that's Chris Metz and Terry Bristol. Now it comes to delivering capabilities. And so in a dialogue with industry, and this industry is represented by the NextGen Advisory Committee, we have got them to provide their priorities in 3 levels, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 are those things, obviously, that are the most dear. Tier 1A, and they're further subdivided into Tier 1A and Tier 1B. Tier 1A are those things that are ready for implementation in your time frame. And so in response, we're in the process of developing a specific implementation plan for the 3 things that summarize those Tier 1A priorities. That's surface management, that's managing aircraft on the ground. I found out how important it was. I was reinforced 2 days ago when I flew in. I also did a jump seat ride. We did a push at 6 minutes to 7, right? And then as soon as we pushed, we got a departure time at 21 minutes after 7. At 7 minutes after 7, our departure time was dead, and we just sat there looking at each other, right? The same thing happened in reverse on the way in. And so for an hour and 10 minutes in the air, if you buy your ticket, it says an hour and 54 minutes, right? And so the goal of surface management is to take that additional pad that you put in, right, and do 2 things. First of all, squeeze it. You're not going to make it 0. But then once you get it squeezed to a reasonable amount, you want the standard deviations to be constant. Engineering students understand that. If you don't understand that, raise your hand, but I won't look. I won't tell anyone. Is that you want predictability, right? Grandma's going to pick you up at 4 o'clock. You don't want to be there at 6 o'clock or at 2 o'clock, right? And so we're trying to squeeze the difference between the actual time in the air and the time that's planned. Make that as small as possible, make that as standard as possible. That's surface management. I'll do less time on the rest because I'm running out of time already, I bet. Okay, so next one is multiple runway operations. That is a location by location analysis to where they have more than one runway to do safety studies to determine how closely you can fly aircraft in terms of time. Next is performance-based navigation. That's also area-unique navigation analysis that allows you to fly more direct routes. And there was an awesome video on that in the last session, which I know you all saw. And then it's data communications, which is digital communications between the air traffic controller and the pilot to reduce read back, hear back, error, and then also so that you can do real-time in-route rerouting. And then finally is let's see, datacom, surface, multiple runway ops, and PBN. I guess that's all 4. And so we owe Congress, we owe the industry, most importantly, we owe ourselves implementation plans with milestones, timelines, costs, and metrics. We owe it to ourselves at the end of next month. So that's revolutionary. That's real change. 1 to 3 years, you have my commitment on that. And then let me just say, just briefly, real quickly, about collaboration. I've been here only 8 months. I've done 4 overseas trips. I've met with the SESAR folks 3 times, twice in Europe, 4 times here. We have a fairly detailed plan of action of specific things we're going to be working together. We have the global swim analysis work that's going to be done in September. We have a significant set of experiments that we've laid out with Michael Stendar, and so happy to talk about that more. And then as for sharpening the saw, we're examining the work that we've done before to figure out how we can do it better. I've gone way over my time. There's a lot I can talk about. This is almost like therapy. I mean, thank you for letting me let it out. And back to Vicki.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Nicely done. Marc, would you like to start your presentation?
Thank you, Vicki. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here today to give you a glimpse of SESAR. This morning, I thought that it could be difficult to speak after the excellent speech of the Deputy Administrator of the FAA. What I didn't know is that it would be even more difficult to speak after General Bolton introduction, very interactive and pleasant one. So sorry to being more formal in my presentation, very traditional PowerPoint. Anyway, if you look at my career, you can see that I'm the man that is trying to bridge ground and board, moving from DACD to Airbus. And creating ProSky, we have purchased Metron Aviation, a US company, so we are also trying to bridge EU and US, and this is why I'm standing here close to your marvelous flag. So I need, I think, this. Sorry. So this is a short update of SESAR. Perhaps you are not so familiar with the SESAR program, but in fact, SESAR program is very similar to NextGen program, of course. So the first thing is SESAR is part of the Single European Sky program. You know that we have a very fragmented airspace in Europe with more than 30 ANSP, and one of the objectives is to have a more unified organization of the airspace. And so the SESAR is a technological pillar of the Single European Sky program. And so, of course, the objective is to developing a new generation of air traffic management system. We have fixed in the very first phase of SESAR very ambitious objectives, you can see on the screen, to multiply the level of safety of the air traffic in Europe by 10, to improve the capacity of 100% or even more, so to multiply it by 2 or 3, because we are expecting a doubling traffic within the 20 coming years, but also to reduce costs, which is, of course, an important issue for the airlines and airspace users. As you know, in Europe, this is a difference, perhaps, compared to the situation in the US. 100% of the air navigation services are paid by the airspace users. 100% of the infrastructures today of the ATM system is paid for air navigation charges by the airspace users. So mainly the commercial aviation, but also a part of the general aviation. There are some exemptions for little aircraft or for militaries, but most of the users are paying fees, charges to support the development of the system and also the services. But this is something also we are expecting from SESAR, is to get funding from the authorities to support this new program. If we look at the time scale, we can say we are on time with SESAR. So the first phase was the definition, fixing the objective. We are now engaged in the development phase, so it is R&D, but R&D until test flights and so on, so advanced R&D. This phase is close to the end. This phase has to deliver a plan for the whole Europe, ATM master plan. This plan has been agreed. And then, so we will start the development phase. But in between, we have something very similar to NextGen again, which is the baseline. So the baseline is the infrastructure required for developing the SESAR program. And so we have in Europe 2 mandates, one mandate on datacom system to develop on board and on the ground, and this is a mandate, which means that this development is required for both airlines and ATM services with a deadline to 2015. And we also have a mandate for surveillance, which is a mixed one, MODES and ADSB, because a lot of countries have developed also surveillance for MODES radar, and so we want to balance it with ADSB and MODES. And then, so we will start the deployment phase in 2015, and with the first package, we call it PCP, Pilot Command Project, which is very similar again of the first package of implementation of NextGen with short-term oriented project delivering benefit to the airlines. So we can say that today we are on time, and we will see the main developments made in this program later on, especially with the video at the end. So the PCP, and in parallel, we will have a second phase of development because this program is aiming at developing a really new system for 2020, but also for 2030. Very similar to what you can find also in the ASBO ICAO phase-by-phase system. So we can say that we have developed with the baseline the ASB Block 0, and we are working on ASB Block 1, and further developments will be for Blocks 2 and 3. So we call it this new development phase, SESAR 2020. Perhaps a little, some words on the specific organization developed around SESAR, because of course we don't have the FAA in Europe. We have many different NSPs, more than 30, even if we have Eurocontrol as a technical center to support them. So we have developed a public-private partnership of SESAR with, at the head, the European Commission, supported technically by Eurocontrol, but also involving the industry. And if you look at the funding on the first phase, a little more than 2 billion euro, you can see that every group of partners brought their part. So EU put 700 million euro on the table, Eurocontrol put the same, but the industry, so Airbus, but Thales, but NATS, all the industry supporting SESAR, and you have the NSP, the airlines, the airport, and the manufacturing industry, put funding together to build a common and harmonized program. We, as Airbus, are also supporting the SESAR joint undertaking, so the organization put in place by industrial support. And now we are thinking about a new organization for the new phase, 2020, but in fact it will be exactly the same kind of joint undertaking with the same partner. We will open the door to new partners, but basically the next phase will be based on the same public-private partnership. Another perhaps originality for the deployment phase is that we will have 3 levels of organization for the implementation. So still the level 1 for the Union, European Union, to set up the regulation, so the rules and standards and so on, and the mandate sometimes. Then in the middle, the level 2, which is a consortium of industry between a group of airlines, major European airlines, a group of airports, and of course a group of major ANSP. And they will have a contract with the EU through a call of tender to be in charge of managing the deployment. And then we have the level 3, which is the current level of the existing ANSP, airports, airlines, individual airlines, to implement the new technologies of the program. But what is really new is this consortium of industry, supported also by manufacturing industry, which would be charged by contract. So we can say that it's really industry steering for this deployment phase. SESAR NextGen coordination, of course, this is a very important issue. I have to say, as Airbus, that there are only 2 domains where we are allowed to speak to Boeing. One domain is ATM. The other is environment. But in 28, just after the launch of SESAR, because Airbus is a funding member of SESAR, we have signed an MOU with Boeing to work on ATM harmonization, interoperability, and so on. So we are clearly working together. Boeing is associating Airbus in the NextGen works and System Engineering 2020, and Airbus is welcoming participation of Boeing to work in SESAR. As a concrete example, we have defined together a common standard to try to have a convergence of the datacom system in US and in EU. You know that today in US the standard is FANS 1A, and in EU it's a FAN B, and we have defined a common FAN C or A plus B standard. We can be compatible with the 2, and we are expecting now decision in the US and in Europe to converge to this unique standard on which Boeing and Airbus have agreed. And so we are contributing to this bridge between SESAR and NextGen. Of course, the institution, EU, FAA are working on it. Eurocontrol also is supporting this at the General Bolton, as I mentioned previously. So the Pilot Command Project, which is the first package, if you look at the objectives, you will find again what General Bolton has mentioned in NextGen. So the implementation of performance-based navigation to enhance the performance of the air traffic around the airport, airport integration and surface management improvement, more flexible use of airspace, improvement of air traffic flow management system, developing of the SWIM, an initial system-wide information management, and perhaps the only difference you can see here is that we would like to implement a first phase of what we call initial 4D. The business trajectory is the core element of SESAR. You will see in the video just after what is exactly the business trajectory management, but this is really the main new concept we have in SESAR to improve the ATM system. So we have short-term oriented project to improve the ATM system similar to NextGen, but perhaps we have already a medium-term view on what should happen next with the initial 4D. And we are developing a lot of capabilities to support this new concept of operation. If you look here at the difference or similarity or differences, as I mentioned, the main difference is certainly on the Datacom standard. The other one is the fact that we are trying to implement perhaps a little bit earlier the business trajectory when in the US it's more oriented to time-based operation. The concepts are not so different. They will converge at the end. It's part also of the ICAO ASBU, but perhaps we give some more priority in Europe to this. And normally, you should have the explanation of what is business trajectory and 4D.
So imagine a European airspace where all the different players work hand in hand to modernize air traffic management, where systems on ground and in flight automatically communicate and transfer data for the optimization of all aspects of flight. Today, we're at the threshold of this reality. All stakeholders, airspace users, air navigation service providers, and the manufacturing industry are all working together towards the realization of the same unique goal: to make air traffic smoother, safer, more cost-efficient, more reliable, more environmentally friendly, and therefore more efficient. This vision is now beginning to unfold thanks to SESAR, or Single European Sky ATM Research, a program dedicated to providing all European ATM stakeholders with optimized solutions. Designed to render air transport operations more efficient, crafted to achieve ambitious performance targets. As one of the key players in the aviation sector, Airbus, in collaboration with its industrial partners, actively supports and contributes knowledge and experience towards the development of the I4D, the initial 4D trajectory management function. An innovation expected to deliver wide-ranging benefits to airspace users and to the air traffic management, or ATM community, as a whole. With I4D, air traffic controllers and flight crews proactively share and agree on the trajectories to be flown, while integrating airspace user preferences. I4D enables the optimization of flight profiles to reduce fuel burn and emissions, and reduce the need of penalizing instructions such as vectoring and holding patterns. It is a promising concept with a distinct objective:
Airbus is committed to the success of the single European sky and help to offer efficient solution in terms of ATM operation for the whole aviation community. I4D is certainly a key enabler of optimized ATM operation. Validation has extremely progressed, and I4D is demonstrated to be mature now.
To understand how I4D really works, let's look at the first real flight that took place in 2012. This flight demonstrated the interoperability and the degree of interaction between an aircraft and air traffic control centers. As the flight progressed, about an hour after takeoff from Toulouse, the A320, in this case, was about to enter the Maastricht air traffic control area, where data link connection was established. Via this connection, the air traffic controller requests the aircraft to downlink the airborne computer trajectory, and information is continuously exchanged, much like text messaging. At the air traffic controller's request, and as soon as trajectory synchronization is achieved, the aircraft then automatically calculates the time window in which it is able to arrive at a specific waypoint, referred to as the metering fix. Using this data, the destination air traffic controller determines the best arrival sequence by taking into account traffic conditions and flight crew preferences in order to derive the optimal arrival time. This optimal arrival time becomes the constrained time of arrival, or CTA, which is uplinked to the aircraft and loaded into the flight management system, or FMS, by the flight crew. The aircraft then automatically manages the remainder of the flight in order to reach the metering fix at the required time, with an accuracy of just under 10 seconds. By reaching the metering fix on time, the aircraft then continues towards the destination airport, while perfectly fitting in with the other traffic.
I say it's this great experience that everybody is connected and the system will work. So we don't actually rush into Munich because we're late and we want to fly a little speedier to give our passengers more extra time at the airport. And then in the end, we arrive at a fully crowded airport and then we have to fly another holding pattern, which we could have avoided if we have been slower down from the beginning of our flight. And I see the advantage that we wouldn't have wasted so much fuel on 2 hours of flight because we were like tacted from the very start of the flight with a certain speed, so we don't actually waste fuel in a holding pattern at our destination airport.
Yes, I see a big potential in the I4D. If we could get the RTA very early in a flight, especially in a long-haul flight, that would give the airlines the benefits to make an efficient flight and not to waste fuel while accelerating in the first part and then decelerating later on.
To validate the I4D concept, it was important to involve all stakeholders and gather feedback from all relevant actors. The SESAR validation campaign began in 2011. And since 2011, the concept has been evaluated by numerous airlines and flight test pilots. Systems and procedures are validated through a significant amount of end-to-end tests with pilots and air traffic controllers during coupled air-to-ground simulator sessions and real-life scenarios.
Today, we can now say with all these validation activities based on simulation and flight test, we reach a sufficient level of maturity to move forward, to take industrialization decision, and to begin deployment.
We have come a long way since the start of I4D feasibility studies. In-service implementation will soon become a reality, with European actors on board. I4D will introduce a new harmonized way of working and communicating for pilots and air traffic controllers that will, above all, be a relevant solution to air traffic growth. The skies will be safer, more efficient, more environmentally friendly.
Thank you. So it was a little bit long, but I think you have a good vision of what is SESAR today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's good video. Well done. Well done.
So I think we have a good overview now of both programs and a context from which to explore a little bit further into each one. If I could start out with Ed, you know, the role of industry in SESAR has been pretty well explained to us with the video and the presentation. Could you say a few words about the role that industry plays with NextGen?
Sure. Thanks, Vicki. And great presentation. And I wonder how good my presentation would have to be if I had to do it without notes in another language. I think that would be pretty. That's pretty impressive, I think. Anyway, there's a very different role with respect to the relationship between our organization and industry and their organization and industry. And industry is a corporate partner, literally. And so, sadly, we're not able to collect industry dollars. So that's one way that it's totally different and totally bifurcated. How we do use industry, though, is that through the NextGen Advisory Committee, we have the broad spectrum of industry. And of course, industry, it's one word for 2 or 3 different communities. You know, industry are the airline folks, which have one set of interests. That's you know, seats, butts and seats. And then you have the folks who are providers of instrumentation, and they're trying to sell that instrumentation because they have a market. You have the industry that represents associations, that represents various stakeholders. And so it's a fairly complex equation. And so we use the NextGen Advisory Committee to have a consensus view, and that's presented to us, and then we take that under consideration. There's no oversight role, although sometimes it feels like oversight. So we're a little bit different. But we are focused as our #1 priorities based upon the industry input.
Thanks. You know, the FAA plays the role, as Ed's explained, as sort of they develop the architecture for NextGen. They serve as the lead systems integrator, if you will, for NextGen. How has that role played out for SESAR?
For SESAR, I think it was a little bit different because it looks like a bottom-up approach. So one of the objectives of SESAR, because we have a very fragmented organization in Europe, was to put together all the manufacturing industry and the operators to think about the future. And so every partner came to SESAR with its own ideas. And the objective of the SESAR joint undertaking, today Florian Guillermet, was to put all this energy together and to give a common orientation to different initiatives. And I think that is one of the main achievements of the SESAR GU. Today, perhaps 2,000 people in many different industries or administrations are working together on SESAR. And now the ATM master plan is there to say, we have looked at everything, but the program now is this one. And so the second phase of SESAR will be more top-down oriented. You have to deliver now the master plans that we have decided together. So perhaps it's slightly different, but at the end, the objective, of course, is to have a common master plan, and the EU, in a similar position than the FAA in the US, will manage globally to be sure that what is delivered is conform to what has been decided in the ATM master plan.
You know, we had a question earlier this morning in the plenary regarding collaboration internally within the FAA. I think that it sounds like that there's been some very successful collaboration efforts within SESAR, certainly with 2,000 players and many different countries and many different industry represented. Ed, could you elaborate a little bit more on the collaboration importance?
I could. And should I be calling you Mom or not? Now you're my mother-in-law, based upon this shotgun marriage. So the FAA, the way the FAA is structured, if you take my job, the assistant administrator for NextGen, most of the department Vicki had actually was vice president for planning under the ATO. So it's a brand new organization, 2.5 years, at maybe 3 years, and I've been in charge of it a third of its time. And so we're still finding ourselves. We're still figuring out, how to do things on a regular basis, inventing processes and doing those kinds of things. But because this organization's heritage is really planning, a lot of the implementation is outside the organization, which requires us to work across organizational lines to get anything done. And so once we sorted that out, once first approach was let's take it over and control it. That didn't work out very well. And so then we had to reach out to folks and say, let's work together, let's collaborate. And so we spend a lot of time with Terry and with Chris, just making sure we're in sync. Terry and I probably talk almost every day, even when she's out of town. We sit down one-on-one once a week. We sit down with our teams an additional 90 minutes a week. And so we're putting a lot of energy into making sure that we're coordinated. We also have incorporated, Peggy Gilligan, who's our regulator, into our weekly sessions. And so the bottom line is that is the only way to build a working relationship is to work on it. So we put probably what I spend most of my energy on a daily basis is working across organizational lines in the FAA, and specifically on these implementation plans that we owe folks. And this is the only FAA that I know. I mean, I'm not an airplane driver. I didn't do this in my previous life, but I'm told that the cooperation is unique and uniquely successful compared to FAA in the past. But I wouldn't know that. I only know what I see.
Thanks. Now, I think that it's interesting that, we're here to talk about integration issues. These are integration panels. And from a lot of perspectives, the points that you've both raised now, the integration challenges are not always the technology challenges. It's not always how you pull the innovative concepts together. It's people challenges and organizational challenges as well. But going to some of the challenges involved, I know that budgetary concerns have to be an important aspect of how this all comes together on both sides. Could you comment on how it's going with both programs? Either one of you might respond in terms of the budget.
Yes, as I mentioned in my presentation, one of the objectives of SESAR is to get funding in Europe of the administration, the institutions. So we've been successful in the first phase in getting 700 million euro, which was completely new for an R&D program. And in the next development phase, we will have something like 600 million, which is quite enough to achieve what we would like to do before 2020. And in addition to this, which is completely new and very important for the deployment phase, there would be a funding from the European Union of 3 billion euros. And if you compare the 3 billion to the total cost for the PCP, which is close to 6 million, it means that 50% of the program will be EU funding. And so for the first time, the airspace users will not have to fund 100% of the new infrastructure. And of course, it's very important to have a business case, a positive business case, because the airlines can support such a program, but they know that the upfront investment is something difficult and they will need some support. And of course, now they are expecting that what we deliver is the performance expected. The performance announced is a definition phase, which of course is a very big challenge for everybody. And the fact that they will participate, the airlines, to the deployment manager organization will give them a view on the management. The deployment manager will have to decide how the funding will be used to have it very efficient under the control of the EU. So this is another important action for them. But globally, I would say that today it's quite interesting to see that EU recognize that they have to put quite a high funding on ATM improvement, and this is something new and very appreciated by both ANSP and airlines.
So how about for the funding for the FAA?
Okay, so there's you give two very different answers on this, and both would be correct, but it's a different way of looking at it. So if you go year over year, compare it to the previous year, this year we have 7.8% less dollars than we had last year. It's about, within the NextGen portion of the F&E budget, which is just under $800 million. And so the saying we used to have when I was in budget, I was only a budget guy for 20 months, but it felt like a lot longer, is that flat is the new up. So it's essentially flat. So from that perspective, we're in a good place. We're able to protect the NAC priorities. But there is a less optimistic way to look at it that's also accurate, in that if you look where we were when Vicki was starting up the NextGen program in 2009, what you thought you were going to get in F&E dollars, which is facilities and equipment dollars, which is what we use to not only do NextGen, but manage the infrastructure, we thought we were going to get $3.6 billion in 2014. That's what Vicki thought when she worked on the budget. We got $2.6 billion. That's $1 billion, right? That's a third. That's a little more than 25% what we thought we were going to get. That's traumatic. And you know, Mike mentioned that in passing. So let me add to that. If you were to go year by year, in each case, starting in 2010, 2011, we got less dollars than we thought we were going to get in 29, and it got bigger each year. So if you take the total area under the curve, that's $3 or $4 billion. You know, that's and if you look at what program we baseline, what did we commit to do? If you look at the analysis that summarized and projected what NextGen was going to be in 2020, and there were several of those in the 2004 to 2009 timeframe, and that's what this program is founded on. We haven't walked away from any of those. There's no major line item in that plan that we've walked away from. And so we've done it with about 4 or 5 billion, 3 to 3.5. I'm trying to do public math here because I didn't know I was going to talk about this, and some of it didn't occur to me until this moment. If you look at the area in the curve, it's $3.5, $4 billion less. You know, that's unsustainable. And so when people say, "Can you do more?" More with what? With what? And so at some point, we're going to come to a tipping point in which we're going to have to make tough decisions about the total scope of NextGen, given that we have $4 or $5 billion left, total dollars less than we thought we were going to get. And so so there's some trauma coming that we are starting to think through. Of course, in the near term, we really focus on executing to show credibility, to deliver benefits. But as we refresh the work that was done prior to 2009 about what the future of NextGen is going to be, it's going to be a different future than we thought. And so from that aspect, we have been severely impacted by the budget, but it's like it's a time delayed. We haven't owned up to that yet.
So in terms of that, and in terms of planning and the kind of interoperability that you've both alluded to regarding SESAR and NextGen, how do you go about addressing those the evolving nature of the planning on both sides of the Atlantic? What's the process that you're using there? Anybody?
This is a real concern. When I spoke to Convergence about the data communication standard, if the NextGen program is delayed and we still have two different standards, it's a problem for us, especially as Airbus, but also for Boeing, because which means that we still have to produce aircraft with two different equipments. So Boeing will have to develop aircraft with the ATM system in Europe, and we will have still to develop aircraft equipage with the standard FANS A. And when we had planned for some new aircraft just to develop the new standard. And so the fact that there is a delay on the objective of having this full interoperability is a difficulty for us. And then to develop new concept of operation, if the two standards are not the same, could be difficult too. And so I think we'll really need to work closely together to adapt. And so I really hope that FAA will have sufficient funding to go on. Even if we understand on both sides that we are focused on short-term and priorities, we have to keep the objective of longer term and harmonizations on two sides.
We're giving it a lot of thought right now. You know, there's the formulaic way. Of course, you know, we've got planning documents that'll be in the process of being updated, but I'm spending a lot of personal time in trying to think through the problem and understand it. One of the things that we've done is that we've asked the MITRE Corporation, our federally funded research and development corporation, to do an assessment of the NextGen program and to determine, based upon the money we spend, exactly where they project will be in 2020. And then try to understand any places that we deviated. In some places we've deviated for reasons. I mean, you had sequestration, you had shutdown that impacted programs. And in some of it will be, you know, execution issues. There was a major execution issue on ERAM just after you left. I'm very confident that we'll be able to execute the NextGen program. There's no doubt in my mind. And as budgets decline, we will make sure the impacts go to lower priorities. And so and plus the foundation is about done. You know, ERAM and TAMR, which revolutionized the work environment of the air traffic controllers, will be complete with, you know, 15 and 16 respectively. So I don't anticipate a significant reduction in NextGen. What I do want folks to know is that as folks, you know, when you talk to folks about when folks give input on, when you get an input from industry, and again, I'm being very blunt because it's an adult audience, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Why not ask for all you can? And you're not going to get all you want. Just not going to happen. Was that clear on that? Okay.
Yeah. I think we all got the buffet part.
Okay,
so,
okay,
yeah.
all right. So that's the thing. Is that, but again, but a priority though is our work with SESAR, and so we're protecting. Bottom line is we're protecting the core of NextGen, our ability to respond to additions that require more money. Our ability to react has been tremendously damaged, and if there are, and as we when it comes to tight budget times, we'll have to prioritize things, and the bottom things will not get done, or they won't, or they'll get done later.
Thanks. So in this process of international interoperability and cooperation and ensuring that you are at least talking and communicating about these changes, what role does ICAO play? How are you working with ICAO? And can you comment on the involvement of the other countries? We're talking here about the US and Europe, but what about the rest of the world?
Let me go quickly and briefly. Basically, we're working with ICAO. ICAO came up with the format that we use to determine international collaboration that we're focusing on with Europe as kind of almost our prototype in a way. And I'm becoming significantly more involved. As a matter of fact, I'm going up there. Are you going to be up there in July? July 7th and 9th, we're going to have some additional discussions. So it's one of the, if you say the handful of things we're focused on, working with SESAR under the guidelines and formats of the ICAO is one of our mastheads. We also are starting to do the work with Japan, and we also want to expand that to others. We also took a trip to Trinidad and Tobago, where I supported Mike signing an international agreement, and the global demonstration, the mini global demonstration that we're doing in Philadelphia, in New Jersey, in 2015. We expect to have a significant international support of that, starting with SESAR. The other thing I wanted to mention, while I have the opportunity, is we're very interested. I mean, you know this, but just so everyone, we're very interested in working with Europe on this deployment manager. You know, SESAR is different in that it is the first part of, you know, we have it kind of womb to tomb. We're in development, research, and deployment all at the same time. Yours is more staged. You're more into the science project portion of it, with about 300 different science projects, and then you're transitioning to a deployment. We've committed to working with them. We want to do workshops and discussions, and we'll have specific workshop on the deployment manager concept, and then share some of the lessons learned that we have. And Florian was very excited about this, and then also bring in some of our friends from NASA and DoD who have a lot of experience in actually fielding systems to kind of help you work through that. And so we're very excited about that, and we'll offer that to our other international partners. So there's just a lot going on in that area in terms of collaboration and cooperation. Sir?
Oh, yes, I think, of course, that ICAO has a very important role to play. First, to fix the standards, because this is the role of ICAO, worldwide standards, and to try to harmonize the different standards existing and plan some new standard. And then, of course, SESAR, NextGen are the two leading programs in the world. But what is interesting in this new technology is that they can fit also for emerging country, fast growth country, yes. Because first they have quite new aircraft, could be Boeing on Airbus, so with high capabilities on board. And then this is something, look at the ADS-B as an example. This is something which is obviously less costly than the radar coverage. They can develop it more quickly, and they can also install on little islands that were not in the past covered by any surveillance and so on. So the role of ICAO and the regional office to develop these capabilities everywhere is very important, and we are, of course, working with them. ECCAIA had a very important role in defining the SBU, and all the industry was behind, FAA, Eurocontrol, and so on also. And we are working with Airbus ProSky in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Middle East. And we can see everywhere people very interesting. Sometimes, let the example of RNP, the Metroplex is a good example of how it is developed in the US, but in Europe we are not so advanced in RNP. And, but if you go to Middle East, to some areas in Asia, you can see they are implementing more RNP procedures than in Europe. And so this is very interesting to see that this is not only for Europe and US, this is also for the other countries. And the problem of ICAO is that I think that their regional office are not developed enough, and they are welcoming, in fact, support from industry.
So, I think it's easy to see the advantages that Airbus and Boeing see from the development and advancement of NextGen SESAR and these other international efforts. But do you think that, that there's a common view of industry in general on this evolution, given the different views and perspectives that are out there?
The airlines are still wondering if all this new technology will deliver the performance expected, and it is one of the big challenges. In the past, they had some disappointment about the fact that it was progressing slowly. They had to invest in new equipment that were not really used or delivering the expected benefits and so on. So I think they are, because they are participating, of course, to SESAR NextGen program, they are aware there are a lot of potentialities behind this. The fact they want to lead in some ways a deployment manager organization in Europe shows that they are very interested. But yes, they want it to be managed in such a way that it's not so technology-oriented, but performance-oriented. And this is true that we all have to manage the two programs in such a way that, and I think the way NextGen is now very focused on short-term benefits, it's good, same. And in the same time, we have to explain to them that, yes, some new technology could also bring in the next steps very important benefits. The 50% objective of reducing cost, to triple the capacity, cannot be achieved without some investment. And of course, if the institution, if the administration can fund also the new infrastructure, it will help them to be more confident in this. But so, and of course for Airbus, these are our customers. So our only objective is to satisfy the customers. So we are working more closely now to them and try to bridge with the NSP to have a consensus at the end on what has to be implemented on short term, on medium term, and so on. And to create this common view of the industry is one of the challenges, but I think, yes, now everybody is ready, at least to discuss it and even to go further in the implementation.
So Ed, in case you might have ever heard that, that things aren't moving fast enough or that it's costing too much or whatever, would you like to add to Marc's comments?
Certainly, and I appreciate your perspective, and I find that we're in very much agreement. I'd like to come out to Airbus and spend some time making sure I understand your concerns. I spent a day with Delta yesterday. understanding. I'd like to see you want to raise you one. I think that there's an opportunity in the surface and managing things underground to, and that's one of our 4 priority areas, but I think there's undiscovered work there where we can do even more. And so what I commit to doing is taking another look at this and see what we can do, not just this 1 to 3 year time frame, but to bridge the gap all the way to 2018, 2020, and how that connects to TBF and TSS, because it, you know, and it's interesting. Let me just say, I'll try to do this briefly, parenthetically, and then for the young engineers, I mean, it's kind of interesting. You look at this country in terms of innovation. You know, we went through a period of individual technologists and scientists. You know, Edison. The Wright brothers, we count them as one, Alexander Graham Bell, to innovative technology leaders who, you know, these guys came up with new technologies and invented things, and innovative leaders who built processes to build technology more quickly. So you go from Henry Ford all the way to Edward Deming. And then I think you're in a phase of now where it's innovative teams, and starting with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and those guys. And that's, I think, characterized by an integration of current technology, new technology, and applications more so than specific technology innovations. And I think that's what we can do in NextGen. And so I think that the opportunity to make a difference without different technology is pregnant. It's there. And technology, you're kind of chasing your tail anyway because of Moore's Law, which was supposed to go away like in 1975, which apparently hasn't gone away. And so how do you, when you have 8-year timelines to put a new technology in place, and technology is rapidly changing every 18 months. I mean, who here has an 8-year-old cell phone, right? I mean, right? So you have to figure out a way to innovate with new technology. And at the end of it, it's transitioning from being about the platforms to being about the data. And so as we can struggle with that and figure out how to put the data where it's needed, and we have the technology, as I said, we have the technology on that show. We can do that. So we want to work with you on that. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but yeah. I felt like saying it.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
All right.
We've talked a lot here about economic challenges in terms of the development of these projects. I wonder if you both would like to say something about the economic advantages. How will SESAR and NextGen impact the U.S. and European economies?
Oh, yeah. There was a very interesting study made by SESAR GU to evaluate, to assess the benefit for the EU economy. And first, that aviation is very important for Europe. It's a very important activity. It is estimated that it contributes to more than 400 billion GDP every year in Europe. And it represents something like 7 million of jobs, which is very important. And it's successful and growing activity. And the direct impact of SESAR was assessed to provide in the 10 coming years something like 300,000 more jobs in this particular area, and on the 20 coming years to contribute to 400 more GDP. So it's huge. It's very huge. Because the aviation sector needs it. It's also a lot of fuel burn savings. So it's something like 18 million CO2 emission less and so on. So if we are managing it well, yes, the perspectives are very important. And now we have figures on the table to assess really what is the real benefit.
That sounds like a pretty good return on investment, Ed.
Yeah, I think I have similar numbers. It's interesting when you compare Europe and America. We're very much the same in terms of volume and size. Our numbers are similar. I like to throw in a quick commercial though that I think that I promise you it pertains. So when I graduated from college the first time in 1983. When I graduated from college, every 6th or 7th person was a secretary. Who has a secretary now, right? You have to be pretty senior. And so if you really look at how society has changed in terms of the workplace and how innovations have come and they've changed things in ways that are unpredictable. an iPad's only 5 years old. It's indispensable to me. It's in my briefcase. Who would have thought cell phones would be cameras, devices to connect to the internet, So I really believe that, particularly starting with I think in the near term, I think you can use current technology to transform on the surface to give you the data to allow you to get predictability so you can better manage. And that will give you a significant improvement in efficiency. I think the next wave will be the foundational platforms in which you revolutionize the air traffic controller environment. And for the question that I didn't get on what's going to happen to all those air traffic controllers, again, I think it's going to free up capability in which they can do other things like, we have one coast that's really busy in the morning and one coast that's really busy in the afternoon, and people in the middle that are doing less. With the things that we're bringing online, you can do air traffic control from any place to any place else, and you can level load the work, right? And so it's not a matter of losing jobs. It's a matter of turning that productivity loose to do something else that we haven't even thought of, and so it will enable different things, right? And that's kind of my thinking. And do you know? Again, I don't know exactly what any more than I knew how I was going to be using a cell phone, 8-10 years ago. I don't know. I turn it over to the folks that were born after I got out of college to sort that out for us. Anyway.
Good perspective on that, though. But it's a different take on how we economically benefit from any kind of innovation such as this. Very, very, very good. Now, I could sit here and ask you questions all day, and you're probably glad I won't, but I'd like to open this up and let the folks out in the audience ask their questions. I see there's a mic in the middle of the room. If you could, thank you.
So Marc Narcus Kramer, I worked at MITRE for 31 years, doing some independent consulting. We did some very interesting work at the JPDO. We looked at, we took all of NextGen and we broke it into 5 different operational levels, took all the operational improvements. And the things that you talked about in phase 1 are significant, but when you look at the entire investment in the infrastructure, it's a pretty small return on investment. What we noticed is when you get to real changes in operations, such as consolidating airspace, ADS-B in, multiple runways, these things are not extensions of how we do business just with some more information, but it is really transforming how we do business. We noticed that the improvements jump very significantly and actually begin to show the return on investment of all this infrastructure. So it's like having a cell phone where you have a few applications versus something that's radically different in terms of like connecting to the internet. What we found is that money isn't really necessarily the biggest issue there. The biggest issue is all the institutional problems associated with getting people to accept new ways of doing business in a business that is so constrained by safety issues, by fear of mistakes, by unions, and so my question is, if we're really going to call this NextGen, it's really not. I applaud the 1A priorities, but it's really the transformation of how we do business. What is your thought about how we break that barrier? Because for me, that is the fundamental issue that holds us back.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question, Mark. Are there any other questions? Seriously, I'll take 2 bad questions in place of that 1 good one. So I knew he was going to ask this because I sallied down and kind of tried to see where the ringers were. I didn't get to all of them. That's one of the tougher questions. And if I think about, if you try to put things in your own words, basically what you're saying is, I think I understood it, but how I would explain it to someone who might not be in this business is that if you're to take today's technology, but using them, if you were to transition from where we were in 1983 and then using today's technology and then just doing the same things. I mean, really, to leverage technology, you have to do different things or do things in different ways. And what we're doing we're doing short-term benefits because that is where the money is, right? We have to show credibility to be able to keep the money going in. But we're not talking about how to restructure how you do work and do things very, very differently. And how do we break through all the cultural barriers associated with that? And I'm just delighted to say that I don't have to worry about that today. No, it's a very tough problem. It's a tough problem, and you know, speaking frankly, which you know, it's probably redundant for me to say speaking frankly. I tend to speak frankly. The FAA is not an environment that tolerates change or change agents very fondly. And once you put a force for change out there, then you're really fighting about change versus fighting about the substance. It's my hope, though, as we push the refresh button on our ConOps 2020, and so we start to get, I've got Steve Bradford and Jay Merkel, and of course, one of the good things that happened to us that we didn't ask for is JPDO is now part of my team, and I've asked Giselle Moeller to come back and lead that. You probably know that. And so I've asked, so we're going to have Giselle, Jay, Steve. We're also working with Jaewon Shin up in front at NASA to help us, give us some thoughts on that. And so we're starting to put together, I've turned to and put some energy into it, and starting to build a team that's going to help us think through that problem. And that will lead to a ConOps, and of course MITRE as well, which I already mentioned, the MITRE study, which is going to be a foundational document to that. I don't know where we're going to be in the end, but we're going to take it on and work through it. Check with us, let's see. October, November timeframe? And you can always call me, I'll tell you whatever I think on any topic as we work through it.
As a follow-up to that, do you see a similar challenge with SESAR, or is the initial industry involvement there kind of making the picture different as you go forward?
There was a news in the newspaper this morning, interesting, you know. There is a strike plan for next week of air traffic controllers in France, which is not really new. But they are asking for more funding. Of course, it's to protect their pay, but they are also saying that we are needing more money for SESAR. And so we could say they are going on strike for SESAR, which is very interesting.
That is an interesting.
Yes, so I think nobody is against progress. And I've worked a lot with the air traffic controllers on many projects, and they are very interesting in moving in their job. As soon as, yes, they can work in a confident environment regarding safety, so they are very cautious on safety, but they're very often very active in promoting new technologies, new operational concepts, and so on. The problem we have is coming from the complexity of the organization of ATM, the number of stakeholders, and yes, the fact that to change a little thing, it's sometimes even more complex than expecting, because we add complexity on this. Yeah. But, and so we have to be able to manage it step by step, and I think this is what we are doing in SESAR as in NextGen, to gain confidence from all the stakeholders in the fact that yes, the technology is there, yes, it will deliver sooner or later a huge benefit, but we have to manage it progressively to have the acceptance, the consensus required, and so on. So we are just at the beginning of the process, but as I explained on SESAR, we are on time. So we are not delayed by some conservative attitude. We are on time, we have a big challenge. So I think this is possible to deliver something very positive and useful for the air transport in the future. Even if we know that due to this complexity, due to the funding issues, due to some cautious attitude, we cannot deliver. I think that this was also the message of the Deputy Administrator this morning. It will not be like that. It will need time, and we have to be patient. I have to say that in my past experience of CEO of an air navigation services, I train my patience.
Let me kick in two more things on that's supporting something he said. Is that one of the things that in change, I don't think, to make sure that I have said this, the air traffic controllers are not going to be the problem. I think Paul Rinaldi and Trish Gilbert are different kinds of leaders than we've had in the past. And we're going to age out of the baby boomer era problem when the post-Reagan era folks kind of age out of the system. The younger folks are much more, I mean, the standard person that's under 25 or so is about as comfortable with technology as the engineers were when I was getting out of college. And so I don't really see a challenge. I think the challenge is going to be in the headquarters. And then secondly, the challenge with long-range plans, I mean, Yogi Berra said it's difficult to make predictions, particularly about the future. I mean, we didn't think about, and I'm a space guy, we didn't think about you know, UAVs, we didn't think about space, and so it's not going to be right, but it should inform us. And I think is that our hook? Or is that a question?
Yeah, well, we were chatting about the air traffic controllers later, and I think you made the comment that I was going to make, that you have a unique opportunity to change the culture with the turnover of the baby boomers. But how fundamentally is their job going to change? I mean, the tool set's changing. How much will it, you know, they do a lot of communication that would go digital, but do you anticipate that the roles and responsibilities will fundamentally shift as we get more and more autonomous with these technologies? Or will you need less controllers, or will they be doing other things? It's kind of interesting. That's a whole new landscape.
Yes.
So I was just curious what your thoughts
and
are.
I'll give you 3 answers, all of which I believe, right? Right. Thank you for that planted question. So the first answer is that we're going to, as best we can, work with all the stakeholders to build a vision of the future. We're going to refresh the work that Vicki did and have a 2025 or 2030 vision that will drive us forward. I don't know what it's going to look like. You know, the second answer is that I think things will evolve more than they'll change, right? And so as far as I can see, and again, there's so much that happened in 2014 that I didn't predict, so I'm not the best person to predict the future. I think it's going to be an evolutionary change, and that we're going to free up capability that will allow us to do more capacity in busy airports and to be able to spread the workload much better and make things more safe, and we're already as safe as we've ever been, but more safe and more reliable, and again, more predictable, which will give us a productivity increase, and then from that point in time that we can see a little bit better. And then the third thing, again, I guess I kind of covered it in the second thing, is that you know, because of Moore's law, again, the difference between, if you look over 10 years, how much has happened in 10 years, what it took to cover in 100 years of technology 500 years ago, you cover in 5 years now, and 5 years from now, you cover in 2 years and 1 year. And so I think things are going to change so rapidly that I think the real change will not be planned change, it'll be change that you do as you see it. On the fly. Something will happen, you'll have an increase in technology, and you're going to get to the point where if we don't modernize these systems, they're going to have, for example, they already have better weather on their iPads, right? I mean, and so if we're not careful, that the systems that people bring to work will be better than the systems we provide them, which isn't a great position to be in if you want to standardize and you want to integrate and you want to save costs. So I guess I should go with my basic answer. I don't know.
But do you know?
Perhaps there are some air traffic controllers in the attendance, so what I would say is this is not an offense, but more a positive perspective. We have the feeling that the evolution of the air traffic control job could be very similar to the one we have experienced with pilots. Because in the past, they were piloting every second the aircraft. Now you can fly hands off. And so the pilot is more a flight manager. He's responsible for taking care of the passengers, but also to optimize the flight, to be on time, to fuel less to burn less fuel and so on. So he's managing the flight. We think that today the air traffic controller are very focused on separation, and they have to react in a few seconds. If you look at the triple runways between Roissy and Le Bourget, if an aircraft is missing, and sometimes it's happened that some general aviation are wanted to land in Roissy-CDG rather than in Le Bourget, because these are parallel runways, the air traffic controllers have 14 seconds to react. 14 seconds. So he has to react second by second. Tomorrow, there will be a lot of more automation, and so he will have to supervise, optimize, manage the system in order not only to deliver safe separation, but also to contribute to the optimum flight, which what we call flight efficiency. So I think this is perhaps the perspective for the air traffic controllers.
Another question from the group. John.
Ed, Marc, and Vicki, thank you much for this this session. It's been enlightening, as always. I've got a very sincere question I'd like to ask, and thoughts from both of you, actually. As we were listening to Marc's discussion, and frankly, I know, Ed, you've got some of the same data and characteristics behind the NextGen work, but we saw targets for capacity, targets for reduced cost, emissions, safety. As we look at this inherently safe, superbly safe system we fly right now, and going back to some of Ed's comments as he kicked this off about our requirements to measure how we're doing, I see a 10x improvement in safety identified by the SESAR targets, and similar expectations from NextGen. How do we measure that? How are we going to validate that we indeed have a system with improved performance characteristics, yet we are driving higher levels of safety, again, where we have this inherently, incredibly safe system that we operate today? And how can we as a community help validate that? If we could. Thank you.
Any ideas, anyone?
I'm happy to so now you know you're talking about his chart, by the way. So one of the tougher challenges that any manager or leader wrestles with is how do you measure progress? And so I'm going to focus the question or my response on the NAC priorities because we have a requirement to specifically measure. But I think the problem is a lot larger. I think there's and first let me say this again: foundational, controversial, and that's why you come to controversy. Why you come to conferences, I think, to have the out-of-the-box discussions that you can't have in real meetings. So for NextGen in the near term, I don't think it's particularly valuable to measure output in terms of benefits and capabilities, which sounds like a conflict with what I already said, but it isn't, because you're going to get the NextGen you've already paid for. You've spent billions. You started this program really in 2004. You started putting real money into in 2007, 8, and 9, and have been spending billions a year for 7 or 8 years. And so now, if you say that, well, in 2014 I'm going to get one more or one less mile, what do I do about that, right? And so this is like if you spent $1 million to build a house in the toniest part of Washington, well, $1 million wouldn't do it. And you're 90% done, you're going to get the house that you paid for. I can change the color of the kitchen cabinets. You want a different kind of hardwood floor. So you're going to get what you've paid for, no matter what you do. The question is, are you going to get all you paid for? And how quickly you're going to get it, and how good it's going to work. And so that's where so much of our energy is going, and that's why we're so intense and focused. And so given that outcome, then your energy should be focused on the oversight milestones it takes to manage those to fruition, knowing that it's the programmatic milestones along with the equipage milestones, along with the milestones from industries and the studies. And that's standard program integration management that I think most folks know how to do, and they probably teach freshmen that now. And so I think people have a tendency to confuse the management you have to do to get the work done with the analysis that you need to take to sell the benefit and what industry's trying to do. And they're not necessarily connected. Now for those kind of milestones, really you want to go to then is look at your pre-implementation dollars that you're spending today and the research work you're doing today that will realize in NextGen programs after this one. That's where that is the most valuable. And then it's also the most valuable when industry is trying to accrue benefits, which is why we're focused really more on the surface area, because that is a place, Wake Recat, two-way data exchange. That's a place where in a short period of time, you can change the way you do things, provide data to the right person at the right time, and have benefits in real time. But those benefits are different. They're, departure, times between departures. So there's bottom line is there's three sets of metrics. It's a confusing answer because it's a confused topic. There's the programmatic metrics and milestones it takes to manage a program, whether it's building a car or building NextGen. There are the benefits case, which it takes to convince industry and Congress and to sell the public in terms of emissions and those kinds of things. And then in the middle, there are the metrics that show how well you're utilizing, for example, performance-based navigation utilization rates. We might build 6,000 PBN routes, but if no one uses them, so how often are they using them? How often are they ask for them? That allows you to implement the programs. So those are the three kinds of things, and still trying to sort that all out. But thanks for the question.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
We want to thank you all for coming here today. We certainly enjoyed this opportunity.
This is a new area for me, so I have lots of questions. But
Okay.
something you just said, I was curious, are there any other national policy decisions or changes or work that has to be done, either in Europe or in the United States, to help implement this new capability, or is all that behind you guys and you don't have to worry about the political stage so much?
You can go first.
It's a good question, of course. We have two objectives. The first one, yes, is to have the support of the authorities, of the politics, because we need funding. And this is the role of politics, to provide funding, because they have to choose where they are putting the money of the citizens according to priorities. And in a period of crisis, this is very important. And we are very happy to see that in Europe, in the European program, there is a clear focus on improving ATM. And so with this SESAR deployment budget of 3 billion, we think that there is a clear message delivered by the politics. Then we need to have a good framework, regulatory environment. And this is the role also of the politics to define. And we have in Europe what we call mandates, so mandatory standards or equipments, and this is the role to the politics. But on the other side, because we want to be sure that there is a positive business case, that this is performance-oriented program, we want the industry in the role of driving all these things, and not too important influence of the politics, because this has to be industry-driven. So there is a good balance to find in setting up the good environment on political side with funding and general rules to encourage the evolution toward this new ATM system. And the other side, the role of the industry, because innovation, technology, and also managed business case is perhaps more in the hands of the industry. So this role of the industry steering the program in the best possible performance orientation.
I like that answer, but I'll only add, for the FAA, there's a lot of policy work. It was interesting to find that actually policy is a fairly big mission area within the FAA, and everyone knows from a money perspective, authorization was what allows you to do a program, but you can't spend an authorization, you need appropriation. So, but for the FAA, you have to be reauthorized periodically. I mean, you didn't have that in DoD, so our current authorization expires next year. We won't exist if we don't get another authorization, right? And so I say things tongue in cheek, but that's fairly significant. There's a lot of serious work that's underway to define, which really defines exactly what the FAA is and what the key jobs are. And so that's very, very high on Mike, Michael, and Rich Swayze, who's our new policy chief that just came over from the Hill. And we're talking about that weekly. They're probably working on it every day. So that's significant. what the roles and responsibilities are with the authorization. And one of the questions that we weren't asked was the privatization question. That's inherent in this, is that if you are going to privatize or not, or change roles and responsibilities or not, that's your next shot at it. That's your next real shot at it. And then also there's, as the safety team and the policy team, supported by, and we're in a support role by us and ATO, come to final decisions on how new technologies will be deployed, like the UAV, then that is a policy, it's a rulemaking, or it's a policy and safety pronouncement that comes forward. And they're beavering away on that for the UAVs right now. And we expect to have a final answer on that late next year. So those are two big ones. But policy is a much bigger part of this, because it's actually how you define yourself and how you operate as new things change. And since you did this, I would be very interested in hearing your response to that question.
On the moderator, I'm not required
on
to.
The policy.
Seriously.
Yes, Mother.
Exception is confirming the
rules. She knows more. I mean, but I do agree with that. Does that make sense to you at least? Because I don't.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think the policy challenges are really tremendous in this, and just for minor things even that sound minor to the public perhaps, such as how do we handle those aircraft that are equipped versus those that are not? Is there an advantage to being better equipped or not? So, and it pops up in many different ways. So it's an excellent question.
It is.
Are there any other questions from the group? If there's somebody there.
Ed Burnett, and my question's more from the fact that I'm a GA pilot, and I wonder how comfortable you are as we go from communications that are going digital, that are point to point. I worry that I will lose some of my situational awareness from the communications that are occurring ahead of me, that I now listen to find out what's going on, what the weather situations are. Will I still have all the information I need when the communications is purely point to point? Your thoughts?
Do you want to go or me? I'll go. So I wasn't, so I'll have to go back and look at that, and you're talking about datacom. So I will give you, there's two answers. On ADSB, you're going to have situational awareness on everything, superior than you have it right now. So that presumes an ADSB in and ADSB out solution, which I know there's some issues with the cost as a GA pilot. But that's the generic answer, is that we think ADSB will provide significantly more situational awareness than what you get verbal. The other thing, and I have to go back and check because I'm not as smart on datacom as I really want to be, as I plan to be going forward. But I did not think that datacom was necessarily point to point, that information, for example, if there's a weather concern, that they could send that to the field of aircraft in that area. And so from that aspect, it would be superior. And that's based upon the 3 demos on datacom that I've seen. That was my understanding. If you understand it, I'll take a note because you seem to understand it differently. And if you give my chief of staff's back there, Gio Fraser, if you give him your card, I'll get an answer back to you. But I didn't think that datacom was point to point. But I don't want to pound the table and say I know until I validate.
All right.
Security.
Actually, that brings up a really good point. What has been the ripple effect through general aviation for the smaller community with the implementation of NextGen and the technologies, and how are they being represented in the process? Because that's a lot of people, and that's people having, I imagine, to train differently or to get certified differently and things like that. Or I was just curious what that ripple effect was.
Are there any other questions? No, just kidding. So that's about 4 questions. Move that microphone, please. So that's about 4 questions. So I will do a standard technique and answer the ones that I know. So first, how they were represented. AOPA, they are very well represented by AOPA, and that's run by Marc Baker, who's new, and Melissa Rudinger, who is not new. And they're on the NAC committee, so when you have a consensus industry position, their views are incorporated in that position. And I think, again, they're very well represented. Craig Fuller used to run it, and he talks about, yeah, when I was talking to Ron Reagan, and it's one of the most influential people in Washington that I've ever met. He knows everybody. He knows everything. And they just actually had a hearing recently in which they had a small business owner of a flight training organization that has 39 aircraft that was on the Hill with Michael. As I understand it, and I'm trying to get to know them. I've spoken to Melissa quite a bit. As I understand their concerns with equipage, it focuses around ADS-B, which we have a mandate for 100% ADS-B compliance for ADS-B out by 2020. Their concern is the cost concern, and so, of course, AOPA, 200,000 members, and they go from the small jets that companies apparently still have, which are $1.5 million, $2 million a pop, all the way down to the airplane that you inherited from your grandfather that still flies and still is in pretty good shape, but it might be worth, your Beamer, it probably would be worth more. And so at the lower end of that scale, where the retrofit costs are a significant percent of the total cost of the airplane, then it becomes a concern. And so we're very familiar with the concern. We're working with them very closely. As I understand it, the costs keep dropping. They're now between $3,000 to $5,000 for the full kit. We expect that to continue to go down. There's one vendor that says they can bring that cost down to $1,000. I think it will drop out. I mean, the Sony Trinitron that I bought, top of the line, TV, was almost $4,000 in 2006. I was at Costco. I can get a much better television for $800 now. That's this thick and it's smart and so I'm confident that technology will drop the bottom out of this, and so I think it'll be less a concern. I think what will be a concern, though, is there are only going to be a limited amount of people in the market, and that people should take advantage of the opportunity to upgrade early because there'll be a pipeline issue. And so the bottom line is that we're standing firm on this on the requirement. Again, we don't really have a voice to be updated by 2020, and we're expecting the market to continue to drop the price as a percent of the total aircraft. And we believe the benefits of GA will be as good or even better than it is for the broader commercial community. So that's,
So, we're going a little long for our panel members, might be alarmed by that, but as long as there are really good questions coming from the audience like this, are there any more? Let's hear them if you have them.
Smoke them if you got them.
Here's one.
Hi, good morning. My name is Olivia Pinot. I'm a research faculty at Georgia Tech. So I've been hearing a lot about Airbus and Boeing working together on standards and harmonizing technologies and so forth, but a lot of traffic in this country is actually handled by regional airlines who fly ERJs and CRJs. So are you actually talking to Embraer or Bombardier as well as far as standards, technology, and so forth?
Yes, quite a bit. I mean, and it's something that I didn't really have a full understanding when I came into this job, and I'm still trying to sort it out between the hub aircraft and the point-to-point and the regionals. But again, our go-to answer for all those things is that we have industry consensus that's represented to the NAC, and they're represented. But we've decided to start to go out and see the aircrafts and to see the aircraft companies and visit them in their natural habitat to better understand their concerns just personally, which is why we went to Boeing yesterday, because you always learn a little bit more. But we realize that the answers are slightly different, point-to-point versus hub. I mean, if you're a hub, and I was kind of surprised by this. So if you take Delta, found out yesterday that 75% of Delta's flights are connection flights, right? Which makes precision and predictability like Uber Alles, because you're managing really a network. right? But if you're point to point, you know, then fuel becomes preeminent. And so we do understand those differences. We are working with the community, and we're you know, trying to come up with a better answer for everyone. But we're looking to the NAC to tee up an answer that's representative of everyone. That's a great question. Shows some insight.
Yeah, perhaps I could add something. Airbus in SESAR is not only responsible for the airborne for Airbus, of course. We are working with Boeing, but also we are associating the user and especially the regional jet. What is interesting to see also is the role of the avionic industry, because they are providing systems for many different kind of manufacturers and not only the big ones. And so they will help providing evolution in the systems to all the aircraft. So we can have some gap in some areas because of the maturity of the systems and so on, but globally the industry is looking at all the type of aircraft, and sometimes you can see even general aviation aircraft having wonderful equipage, more advanced than a lot of commercial aircraft, I have to say. And so the fact that the whole industry is working on and involved, and we are working a lot with Honeywell as an example, with providing a lot of avionics systems to a lot of manufacturers, and so everything should help progressing towards a different kind of manufacturing. Of course, we here again, before 100% of the whole aircraft flying in the world will be equipped, it will take time. And then we come back to your questions, how to accommodate mixed fleets in the best way we can, which is certainly key in the coming years for the good implementation of our programs.
Anybody else with a question? Yes, sir.
Chris Marco with IATA. I have a question. It's related to security of the systems. It's a bit down to the weeds, let's say, but has work been done towards what access will be provided, who will have different levels of security, and also the harmonization between the two, let's say talking about the FAA and Europe. We're talking about electronic signatures. How is that going to be accepted? Are the two pretty much jurisdictions going to agree on a single way to provide individuals, pilots, and others with a single identity?
Very good question.
Yeah.
You know that Airbus has proposed an electronic signature was not adopted because some other manufacturers were not ready, I think, to accept this idea. But obviously, this is a huge concern. As you said, our systems are more and more linked to internet and so on. And so we are very careful about protecting. So the certification process concerning the aircraft is quite mature, I think. Mm-hmm. And we are working hard to keep this security of our aircraft. But the global system is quite now open to many communication. This is the future, and so we have to take care of this. So I think there will be very soon initiatives in both Europe and in the USA to work on it. And of course, we will have to work together on this security issue. This is certainly one of the most important and most challenge to tackle in the coming years. Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a tough problem in work. I'd say we have the relationship, we have the processes and protocols to work through this and other problems. I'm not confident that we've solved it. We've got some smart people off and working it. Of course, you have the harmonization report that's coming out, and security is a big section of that. So we've thought through what the problem means, and we've thought through what the concerns are, but we're at the beginning of the middle of working through to come up with a solution. But it'll be iterative because I think, security is ongoing, right? And so you'll have smarter criminals, right, than you have today. So I think we'll have to not only come with an answer, but make sure we have the mechanisms in place to continue to refresh that answer going forward. And particularly in the cyber area, which is something that I worked a little bit in a previous life, and that's another one. There should be a Moore's law for the cyber threat. The good news is that DoD has put a lot of energy and money into this, and so we're going to hitch to their wagon. I hope they're not here today to hear this, and try, because again, why reinvent the wheel if the DoD has the money, and they've got smart people working it. They've been doing it for a generation. They've got and the intel community is pretty smart on this issue, as we found out to our dismay. So the other folks are ahead of us on this problem, and we want to leverage that. I think that's going to be the smart way, because I don't think we'll ever have the resources to get to be the leader in this. We just want to leverage what's out there.
So I see we have another question. Let me just ask the panelists, are you okay with continuing on?
I sure am. Is this catered? Is lunch coming in? I'm just wondering. Because I have metabolism issues. It was supposed to slow down when I got 30, which didn't happen, or 40,
I don't know, baby, but I'm having a great time. And Sandy's here, and she hasn't kicked us out of the room yet. So, so please.
Hi, my name's David Ballard. A lot of times benefits of these improvements are expressed in terms of operational advantages for airlines or other operators. But at a certain point, the new system becomes a common operating environment.
Yes.
And there aren't any competitive advantages to any one carrier for being in that environment. And the benefits go to passengers, to the ultimate users of the system. And I wonder, often the benefits are spoken of in terms of benefits to airlines, but ultimately that's not going to be true. And I wonder how you think about bridging that medium-term, long-term distinction.
Yes, I think this is one of the important concerns from the airlines today. They are telling us, if I invest in something, I need to have a competitive advantage. And this is a complete new paradigm in the system. But I think they are right. And now we are asking the airlines to contribute to the enhancement of the ATM system performance. And the fact that some, because especially in the US, but in many cases in the EU, the new equipage are not compulsory. So it's something we are expecting from us. So I think we have to deliver something as a counterpart of their contribution to the improvement of the system. So it can be through the reduction of cost, reduction of charge. There is a system in Europe which is not used today, but a modulation of charge could be allowed for encouraging the aircraft to be equipped. And so we could use this as incentives to encourage and to give a direct benefit to the one who decide to move first and not waiting to being the last one, and so having at the very end of the process the benefit. But I think it's really something we have to think about, and it changed a little bit the relationship between the air navigation services and the airlines. And here again, and I think IATA is supporting this in some under some conditions, but to have some advantages delivered to the most capable. I think they are defining it to the most capable airline is something that will bring value to the system and will accelerate, in fact, the implementation of the new capabilities.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we certainly wrestle with that. And I think to the extent that the airlines channel the good of the user, right, because it's capitalism, they're trying to provide that, then I think that touches to that problem. I think the other thing, too, safety is in everyone's interest, so we'll be more safe. That's everyone's interest. Reduced emissions is in everyone's interest, and so we're reducing emissions, right? And reduced fuel costs is in everyone's interest, with the hope that that would be passed along to the consumer, certainly passed along to the people who own the company. And so that's, I think, one piece of the overall answer here. I think the other piece is that we are thinking about that on a regular basis. But again, back to the statements of you kind of get the next, you're 90% built, the house is 90% built, and so you can't change your thinking about it in the last 10%. Otherwise, the last 10% will cost you 20 or 30%, and you'll get half of it. So as we try to close out the products that we've built and have them have the most benefit as possible based upon how they were designed, I think you're locked into that kind of thinking about them. Your new way of thinking is going to be part of the next generation. It's a part of the research and development that you're doing now that will turn into programs that will result in the capabilities and benefits that are in the 2020 and 2020 beyond timeframe. And again, the work that we're going to do this summer as we try to examine the work that has gone in the past, where Vicky designed the future, to refresh that for where we are now, to include new entrants in UAVs and space. We'll incorporate that kind of thinking, but I don't have final answers. November.
Anybody else? Well, with that, I think this has been a very interesting session. I want to thank both of these panelists for the great job, the great answers, and for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.